You're about to hear one of the most fascinating podcasts available on the internet today. Listen in now as host John Leslie and his dynamic guests are talking about radio.
Hi, everybody. This is episode number 36 of Talking About Radio. And I've been looking forward to sitting down and talking with our guest now for a month. I've been chasing her all over North America for close to a month and finally got her cornered. I believe we'll find out in a second. I believe she's out in California at the moment. The good news is that during the time that I had prior to the weeks before we had an opportunity to get together, I had an opportunity to do a lot of research. And the bad news is that I have so much research that by the time I read it, she won't be able to speak. It'll be the end of the program. I've already gone through 5 highlighters, I believe, highlighting things that we want to talk about. But I want to introduce a really interesting lady who is the owner of, or the president of, Geller Media International, broadcast and podcast expert. You're an author. We're going to talk about the books that you've written, a consultant, a coach, trainer. Valerie Geller, are all of those things really you?
All of those things. And they actually all work together. And basically what I do is help people who like to communicate, and particularly in audio mediums. So whether it's radio or broadcasting, although now in our current media environment, doing a lot with video as well, but really help people get, keep, and grow audiences. So it's about how to create compelling content. And I believe that there are no boring stories, only boring storytellers. And it never has to be boring. If you learn some really quick techniques and apply them, your stories can be compelling and powerful.
Well, this goes back, doesn't it, to the very beginning of radio and television broadcasting, first radio. When KDKA went on the air, when was that, 1908?
It's over 100 years.
Yeah. And the same holds true today, except there's a whole new face on it, and that is there is a whole new medium of delivery of the product, and there are so many more people who are wanting to get into the broadcasting business. Everybody seems to think that they can be a big star on either video or podcasting or internet radio. And it's just not that easy. You can't just turn the switch on and become immediately successful.
Right, John. One of the curses of radio and audio media in general is that because everybody can talk, everybody thinks it's really easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
But just like, a great ballet dancer or a football player, or a golfer, I mean, how hard can it be to kick a little ball across a field or to hit a ball into a cup, But then you try it, and it takes a lot of practice, a lot of skill, a lot of training, and at the end of the day, persistence, and then the magic word, which is talent, ability, and that extra spark that certain people have. Think about it. Why is it that one singer can sing a song and it cuts you to core and moves you so deeply, and 25 other people can sing that same song and you like it, but that magic doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So my job a lot is trying to find and identify and work with people who can make the magic for radio stations. But now it's about, if you have a story to tell and you want an audience to hear that story, we can help you shape that story in your podcast or your broadcast so that it will be compelling and you will get audiences.
Our guest is Valerie Geller, Geller Media International. And do you do this mostly one-on-one, face-to-face, in seminars?
Well, I work a lot of ways. I do seminars and workshops, and that's a very broad way to reach a lot of people with an overview. And it really falls into 3 categories. Number 1 is need for change, because we're working a little bit differently now than we have worked in the past. And in a workshop, you can go over the fact that people have less of an attention span right now because of the plethora of distractions and all of the shiny media that's out there for them to choose from. People don't want to be bored for 1 second.
Yeah.
And so we have to apply techniques to cut through that and to be able to get the attention of the audience. So the first part of any work that I do with anyone is, why do you need to change or learn some new techniques? And so when I work with a group of professionals, that's the first thing. If I'm working with somebody who's never done it before, if they've read my book, it's a little bit like buying the cookbook and then inviting the chef to come home and cook in your kitchen. That's really what it is. So the book is really out there, Beyond Powerful Radio. Keeping growing audiences. The reason that I wrote the book is because I'm not able to sit down with every single person, but I really want the techniques in the world, and I want people to be able to work with them. The techniques are based really, really on 3 things: tell the truth, make it matter, and never be boring. And if you can do those 3 things, you will be able to get an audience. Tell the truth, which is obviously get your facts right, but it also means truthfully, authentically. Are you interested in what you're talking about? Truthfully and authentically, is this your real personality, or are you playing the part of an actor, playing the part of a presenter on air? So it becomes, the more authentic and the more real, the more truth you hit, the better. Making it matter. Why should someone care about this? Before anything goes on air or on a podcast, you should always answer the question, why should I listen to this? Or here's why you need to listen to this. And if you can start with that, then it will have that impact of how it matters. Here's why you need to listen. And then finally, never be boring. If you are bored, it is boring. And so, make sure that, I'm sure you've had the experience where maybe you've gone to a party and there's a little cluster of people and they're around some guy and he's telling some story about something you don't even care about, but everybody's laughing and he's fascinating and it's interesting. And conversely, someone at the dinner table is talking on and on about something you actually care about, but you can't stay with it because that person is boring. It's not the story, it's the storyteller. It's what you bring to the story. And with audio medium, radio, podcasting, some of the tricks in our bag, some of the colors in our paint boxes that we can paint with are, visual language. If you can close your eyes and imagine you're talking to a blind man and describe things visually, it's more powerful. For example, if I say to you, John, did you see the beautiful sunrise this morning? You could say yes or no, and that's the end of it. But if I say to you, John, look out the window, it's a tangerine sky. If you paint the picture a little bit, it makes it more powerful. So the more you can paint pictures using your words, the better.
It's an acquired skill. It's not, and some people are born with it, but
you can learn it, and everyone can get better. And here's the thing: you may not be a great storyteller, but you can become a better storyteller. Every single person can learn these techniques and become better. They can jump up to the next level. Everybody.
I was just the other day, I did one, as part of this series, I do little, what I call mini casts, just little stories from my personal files from over the years of broadcasting, the 50 years. And I told the story that occurred in Des Moines, actually. And I had this notion that when the circus came to town, it wasn't in town for everybody. It was in town for sighted people. And I invited 100 sightless children to be my guest at the circus. And we hooked up a closed circuit intercom system with earphones to all of the children. And I did play-by-play of the circus.
How wonderful. And again, the play-by-play, the fact that you can do that means that you can speak visually. And when you can speak visually, that is a skill that helps you as an audio communicator and, quite frankly, a communicator in life,
Absolutely. And, as I look through the various chapters of your book, the titles of the various chapters, Beyond Powerful Radio, and you've listed 16, 7, no, you've listed 27, 28, 29, maybe or more topics of subtopics that you could talk about. And as I looked at these, I said to myself, every one of these, each one on its own, could be a whole program, a whole educational
Well, it's
series.
interesting because they all work together. In this book, even though I have, something like 19 chapters on news and storytelling, we have chapters on presentation and post-production and air checking and how to come up with topics and really how to tell a story, all of those things. But we also have chapters on sales and fundraising. And if you fundraise for public radio, you can use it. But if you fundraise for your local hospital or a charity or Scoutorama, you can also use these techniques, and it's all about storytelling to get your message across so that you get either time or money, which are the two currencies we deal in, from our audiences that we cherish very much. There's a chapter on burnout because creative people, and particularly reporters, like a lot of reporters, just like a lot of police officers, if you see enough bad stuff, if you see enough car crashes and shootings and fires and destruction and corrupt politicians, and if you see a lot of bad stuff, sometimes that can just suck the life right out of you and you can burn out.
Yep.
And so we have a chapter on how to deal with recharging your creativity and how to take care of yourself, because how can you tell stories if you're down? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I can relate to that. After 50 years of doing morning shows, and
right, creative. When you're creative and you get tired, and how do you rev that back up and recharge the battery? And so we have a lot of ideas based on psychology and even things like take a walk in nature, or just make sure you're getting 8 hours of sleep a night, or surround yourself with people who nourish you. Avoid energy vampires. Those people who just exhaust you. When you're going to have dinner with somebody and you just know you're going to be exhausted at the end of it, don't have dinner with that person. Find the people who make you feel wonderful and energized and happy,
One of the things that's, I'm going to, when we were talking about, I guess we got into talking about if you're bored on the air or on a podcast, it comes across. People hear.
Absolutely. They sound like they're phoning it in. And in fact, if the number one way it's boring is if it feels long, or you're watching the clock, or you're thinking about lunch. Or you have an out-of-body experience when you're on the air interviewing somebody. If anything inside your own head gets more interesting than what's coming out of that microphone, you're in trouble. And if you're bored, I guarantee you the audience is also. You can't be an actor playing the part of a broadcaster. You have to be fully present and have genuine curiosity,
Yep. What comes to my mind, I was in Kansas City, was working at a station in Kansas City doing mornings, and our program director was let go. And so they did the worst possible thing they could do. They named me program director and morning show host. Terrible combination. But
I think you have to really separate church and state. If you are the PD and you're also doing mornings, you have to make the show sacred space where, salespeople can't come in. You can't deal with any other of the problems at the radio station when you are on the air. When you're on the air, the audience and the show is the most important thing. The minute you get off the air, then you can put on the PD hat.
Yeah.
But it's very, very tough to ask people to do both jobs because it just takes everything you've got. It's not a reasonable thing to ask people, I think.
This one particular day, I had finished my morning show. I went into the program director's office and the monitor was on, and I was listening to the midday guy, and I said, "This is brutal. He is so bored." And I walked down and into the studio, which I really kind of broke one of my rules. You never approach a guy while he's on the air, or a personality while they're on the, but I had to get him turned around.
But there's a second rule, which is do whatever it takes to protect the product.
So he swung around. I walked into the room. His back was to me. And I said, "Mike, look at me." And he turned around, swiveled the chair around. And I said, "What time is it?" And all of a sudden, I saw his eyes darting toward the glass windows, trying to find the reflection of a clock. I said, Mike, you don't even know what time it is. And it's coming across on the air. And he got the message. And I think, I'd like to think that he improved considerably after that.
Yeah, I think they can self-correct, and one rule that I have when I work with any talent or any broadcaster or anybody who's creating content is never feedback or criticize without the audio. So I usually wait till they get off air and then I play back what they did,
Mm-hmm.
and then usually try to let them say to you, oh, I guess that went on a bit, or I sounded a little out of it, or whatever. And then if you present a problem, always try to present a solution so that you're not just picking on them, but you're actually guiding them and directing them like a director would direct an actor with ideas and solutions for how they can fix the problem. But it sounds like you managed to do, sort of shock therapy where you walked in and just went, what time is it? And he was so out of it, he didn't even know. I think in that instance, you probably handled it. And you also know your people. But I do have a chapter on air checking, which is how to take today's work and listen back to it and get better tomorrow by listening to what you did today, kind of like looking in a mirror. And I find that to be a very valuable, with a criteria. You go through and you air check on air people, and they really do get better.
Well, I want to, if you don't mind, I'd like to discuss that a little
Sure.
in a little more depth. I was very fortunate. Throughout the apex of my career in the 70s and 80s and into the mid 90s, I had my own special way of getting some really colossal numbers in the morning show. And then whenever a program director would want to critique me, and we would sit down and he would critique me the way he would have done it. And I would say, well, that's not the way I do it. You're trying to break the winning combination here. One of the nice things about doing podcasts at home is you can hear the dog barking in the background.
That's okay. No, it's real life. I think after COVID-19, everybody got very used to, real life in the background. And I don't think we're as, we don't need to be in this rarefied air of complete silence anymore. People understand that real life is happening around us, and that's just how it goes. But I think what you're talking about as far as being directed by somebody who's trying to mold you to his way of thinking instead of allowing you to be the artist that you are, one of the great things as directors is to hire really good people, and then you have to let them run. And they may do it differently than the way you do it, but the answer has to be, was it boring? And if it wasn't boring, then it probably worked. And did they say anything that's going to lose the license?
Yeah,
and if they didn't
right,
say anything
exactly.
that's going to lose the license and it wasn't boring, it's probably going to be okay. And I think sometimes PDs get very wrapped up in the minutia. And you can sometimes worry about how many times you said the name of the station, or did you break at the exact moment you were supposed to get a commercial in, or whatever. And I think sometimes they get very, very worried about format instead of the main thing, which is, are you engaging the listeners? And does it matter to the audience?
That is the most important thing, is engaging. And I always said that I never allowed guests unless I had a guest in the studio, but I never allowed the office staff to come in while I was working. And
you have to make it sacred space. You have to just let them know that this is artist at work. And if you have anything to say to me, unless the building is on fire, it can wait until after you get done.
Well, even that you can turn into a bit. The building's on fire. I'm going to take the mic outside.
Yeah, right. We're just going to be moving the show to an outdoor arena here.
Right. Valerie Geller is my guest on Talking About Radio with John Leslie. She is the owner of Geller Media International. And there are a couple of things. Our time is going by very quickly, and I don't want to run out of time before we talk about a number of things. I want to cover a couple more things in your book, and you've written several books, and I want to get the names of those to the ears of our listeners. But I want to touch on your
The
background.
main one right now is Beyond Powerful Radio, a communicator's guide to the internet age. And it is available as an audio book, which is actually free on audible.com. If you're a member of Audible, you can get a free book, and you can get Beyond Powerful Radio as your free book, and they give you a free trial. So they make it very easy. And then the book is available in paperback and hardcover and ebook and every way you can get the book. And I'm really proud of it. And it's got, like 30 contributors from people who I think are really smart and know what they're doing. And so when you get this book, you're getting the wisdom of all of us collectively of ways we have found to make it work for creating product, doing it consistently over time, and promoting it effectively.
Now, how much time do you spend on the road? I personally know that you spend at least a month.
Yeah, I'm on the road a lot.
Yeah.
COVID-19 kind of ate into that. But when I lived in New York City, my mother used to say that my apartment was the world's most expensive storage unit because I just was never there. I was traveling. I work in 42 countries. The work itself translates throughout the world because it's really not about radio. It's about human beings communicating with one another. And, are you informing, entertaining, are you persuading and inspiring people? Are you connecting them to their tribe, their community, their towns, their people who have similar interests? So it's really that, and it's a very human thing. So it translates across all languages and all cultures. And in fact, the book just went into Turkish. It's available in French and in 9 other languages because, again, it doesn't have that much to do with, American culture or, what we're doing here. It has to do with human beings connecting and communicating with one another. Now, that said, I had a pretty long career in radio before I became a trainer and a coach and a consultant. I had worked for a very long time as an on-air person, a producer, a news director, and ultimately an executive producer for talk radio, and then ultimately as the program director for WABC in New York. And so I really had a very long career and lived all over America and learned a lot. And when I wrote the first book, which is called Creating Powerful Radio, it's out of print now, but that was the first one in the 90s. When that first book came out, it was the book that I wished somebody had given me because I didn't have a book. I had to just learn it all by, if you did a good job, you got more offers. And if you did a bad job, you got fired. And sometimes you did a good job and you got fired because the guy didn't like you. Right. Somebody just didn't like you and you lost your job, And so it took a long time to learn how to, navigate. And I lived in 13 cities at different radio stations before I got to New York. And by the time I got to New York and when that job was done, it became, what do I want to do?
Mm-hmm.
And that became, I want to teach this to people and I want to share what I know and I want to see the world. And so that's when I began to work in, England and Sweden and Germany and Russia and Turkey and just all over Australia, all over the planet.
I have been to many of those countries and to Moscow. Back in the 80s, I spent off and on 7 years working with Gospel Radio. And
it's fabulous. They also have a jazz network there and a news talk network in Russia. And it's fantastic because, again, Russians, and let's not talk about governments. Let's talk about people.
Yeah.
People in Russia are great storytellers. There's a lot of depth, a crazy kind of humor. And it's just a lot of fun when you get to know people as human beings. People are not their governments. Humans are human, and we have that in common.
I think it's important to insert here too that I know people. I still have people cringe when I say that I was back and forth to Russia 12, 14 times. They say, "That's the enemy, man. What are you doing? You're giving aid and comfort to the enemy." Well, there was a period of time back in the late 80s when Mikhail Gorbachev was the Secretary General. He really wanted to be friends with the United States, and he made a real effort to do that.
Yeah, during the Reagan years, Russia, the barriers came down. But I think, our problems now are a little bit different. But, I think that any person who is the leader of a country, does that person represent you? And the answer is not necessarily, And so you have to really look at people and not governments, because that's really where the heart of creative work happens. And there are artists all over the world, and we have more in common with one another than we do areas where we don't agree.
Absolutely. I want to go back, if I may, for just a couple of minutes here that we have. When you were at WABC, that was during the talk years?
Yes, I was there after it had changed format, and I came from KFI in Los Angeles. In 1988, we had changed KFI from a music station to a talk station, and I was part of the initial staff that made that transition. And after 2 years, it had really grown and became very successful, and I then made the move to WABC. And I think one of the advantages I had as program director of WABC in New York was that I did not grow up in New York or any of the listening areas of that station. So to me, WABC was not the hallowed halls of the myth of this big, big station that it was historic in the minds of people who grew up with it. I came in with very clean ears and was able to make hires and make decisions to help the station move into the new format and the new day, because I didn't have that echoing of the legend of WABC.
The slate had been wiped clean. It's kind of like
For me,
I guess
because I
it's
didn't, yeah. And I think sometimes when you come in from the outside, you do have a different perspective, and you're not so married to tradition. It's not that I don't value tradition, because I think the traditions are great, especially when you can carry them over. But it also helps you with it makes it easier to make changes, I think, when you come in fresh.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you don't want to be the person, the morning show host who replaces the guy who's been there for 30 years.
Well, if the guy who's been there for 30 years if it's not working anymore, and if audiences don't listen to that person anymore, and you're in the business of getting ears to radios, then it becomes, we're in business and we need to really make a change so that we can get capture the audience back. And it doesn't mean there's no place for that person. A lot of times what you can do is take that morning man that's been on for 30 years and give that person a weekend show so that listeners can listen to that person, and maybe give them drop-ins on the new morning show so that they get to be part of it, but they don't have to carry the whole show. So there's always a way, where you don't have to blow something up totally. You can integrate it. You can weave it together, not like a mosaic, but like a tapestry.
Well, Valerie, you've been named among the 50 most influential women in radio a number of times, haven't you?
It's really cool. It's so nice to get recognized and to get awards, but as you know, and as I know, it's not why you do it. You do it because you love it.
Yes.
You do it because it makes you happy to do it. And the old joke about radio was, you should choose a career in radio the same way that you would choose a spouse, not because you can live with them, but because you can't live without them.
The name of the current book is Beyond Powerful Radio. And I encourage anybody who is interested in starting a podcast or interested in going into radio, and those jobs are fewer and fewer and harder and harder to find. But this is a convenient place to get the information that took me 50 years to gather up.
Oh, John, thank you so much. And in fact, if you go to beyondpowerfulradio.com, there's excerpts and links and whatnot on that website, and you can get the book and the free audiobook off of beyondpowerfulradio.com. There's also another website, because I'm working with podcasts, and it's called creatingpowerfulpodcasts.com. And you can see some of the shows that I've been working with. And also we have a blog there, which gives you tips and techniques that work, quite frankly, for both radio and podcasting.
Valerie, are you any relation to Uri Geller?
I'm not. It turns out that in Austria and Germany, the name Geller is a little bit like Smith in the United States. So there's an awful lot. People would ask me, are you related to Sarah Michelle Gellar? And I think on the show Friends, they used the name Geller for Ross, and his, it's a very, very common name. And of course, Bruce Geller was the executive producer of Mission Impossible. And so people know the name from that as well. But the bottom line is it's a very, very common name. And when I looked on Google and when I was trying to get a Gmail account, which I do not have, my email is valerie@gellermedia.com. But when I was looking at Gmail, there were 3,000 Valerie Gellers on Gmail. So it's a very, very common name, and I had no idea.
Very interesting. And folks, do yourself a favor and get a copy of the book. And then not only that, go to your favorite search engine and enter Valerie Geller's name and find out
and also,
a lot
if
more.
you want to follow on Twitter, I love Twitter. I know there's a lot of controversy around Twitter, but it is one of my favorite. It doesn't feel like work. I just enjoy it. And on Twitter, it's at V like Victor Geller, Geller. So if you're on Twitter, if you follow me, I will follow you back because
Okay.
it's a fun way to have connection.
It has been a real pleasure to have you on our program today. And I always feel when we complete one of these interviews, and the majority of the people I've not ever met before, and when I'm done, I feel like I've made a new friend.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on your program. 36, that is a commitment, and it's wonderful. And some of the people you've had on are fascinating, and you are a joy and a delight to spend time with. And I do also feel that I've made a new friend. So John, thank you so much.
Valerie Geller, thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Talking About Radio with John Leslie, a podcast that features conversation with the greatest broadcast professionals everywhere. If you'd like to be a guest on Talking About Radio and share your favorite radio stories, just send an email to talkingaboutradio@yahoo.com. Thank you for listening.